People say kids are innocent, but I rather think they are uninhibited. They see things as they see and say what they mean without judging or filtering them through social conventions, and without any attempt to explain or justify themselves. Their such raw comment or behavior could sometimes come across incredibly baffling. Today I collected stories about little children. Their sometimes mysterious, sometimes creepy behavior observed by adults. In some cases, it could be just a grown-up observer's imagination that blows out children's simple, meaningless comment, and will never fully understand what kids really mean with what they said. But reading one similar story after another, I cannot but think there might be something after all. After all, adults' fear of children's mystery is nothing new. Henry James's novella The Turn of the Screw and more contemporary account about so-called black-eyed kids are all rooted in that. So, here are 7 stories about not-so-innocent kids told by their parents and teachers. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by host, Anthony. I work for a kindergarten. Dealing with little kids and toddlers is my daily life. They are, of course, mostly adorable and innocent, but sometimes their naivety can come across a bit creepy. One of the kids under my care is a 5-year-old boy. He has a 1-year younger brother, and apparently seems to get lots of stress regarding his brother. You know, parents would typically reprimand the older of the siblings, saying, "You are the older, you should be big boy and be generous with your little brother," and so on. One day, this boy passed on the news that his mother had a baby in her belly. I congratulated him for a new baby sibling, but the boy said he wasn't happy about it at all. Knowing his situation already, I just smiled and told him things would turn out fine. But the boy said, "Can't I just grab the baby and pull out of Mom's belly? Nobody would know if I threw it away somewhere. Maybe I can take my younger brother too. Well, he can walk, so maybe I have to cut his legs first." I was dumbfounded. I knew it was innocence talking, not yet fully comprehending the right and wrong, but I can't deny it freaked me out a bit. I quietly explained why it was a wrong idea that such an act would cause lots of pain to others, and fortunately he seemed to understand. But I sometimes do wonder and want to see how these little minds work to come up with such ideas. My mom works part-time as a babysitter. Mothers would drop their kids at our place for the day. My mom takes only one child at a time, so it was more like a daycare for one. So, over the years, babies and kids ranging from 4 months to 7-year-old came in and out of my house, and I was often forced to give mom a hand. By now I consider myself a half-expert in childcare, having experienced from baby vomit to piss shower. Some people say young kids maintain their instinctive sixth sense because their souls haven't been tainted yet. And from my experience with many of them, I kind of agree that they seem to have something. I remember a 2-year-old boy. I hear his mom got pregnant with a second child just for about 3 months, well before a baby bump. So I told the boy, "Are you happy soon to have a younger brother? You will be a good older brother, won't you?" But his reply was, "No brother now, later." It wasn't the kind of response I was expecting, so I asked, "Why not now?" Later, later, he simply said. I, of course, just laughed at the time. One doesn't expect to understand everything a 2-year-old was supposed to say. But I was a bit spooked when I learned his mom miscarried a baby not long after our conversation. Could he meant this when he said, later? Another case was a single child of the similar age. I once teasingly asked her, "Do you want a baby brother?" "I have one," was her reply. I laughed and said, "But Mommy said she wasn't planning one." But the little girl insisted. "No, I have one, I have one." Again, I just thought she wanted a baby brother or sister so much. Not long after, I learned her mother was indeed pregnant with a second child. Somewhere I read young kids could still remember their time before birth. I could not pass on the opportunity when a 2-year-old was brought in under mom's care. "Where are you from?" I asked. "From home," was his reply. No, before home. Do you remember where you are from before home?" "Mommy." "So you remember when you were with Mom?" "Yeah." "What were you doing then?" To my surprise, the boy showed me the fetal position just like a fetus in mother's womb, and said, "I slept like this." Wow. So, what was it like? "Warm." "You slept all the time?" "Nah." And then he moved arms about as if splashing in the water. By then I was all goosebumps. Was it all true after all? I noticed they start losing this kind of fascinating insight by 3 or 4th year. I just find it so mysterious. My sister was expecting a second baby when her first son was about 4. The first nephew, who was unusually smart little thing, then asked me, "Auntie, would anybody still love me when the baby's born?" I, of course, tried to convince him otherwise. "That's not true at all. I love you, your mommy loves you, your grandpa and grandma love you too. We will all love you and your baby brother just the same." That same evening, I and my sister watched TV together, and I think we both dozed off. I woke up sensing something pushing in between me and the sister. It was the nephew. Still half asleep, I watched him leaning on his mom's belly and whispering, "Auntie says she'll love both me and you. But I think she's lying." I must say I was all goosebumps watching the little boy walking away. My mom has run a kindergarten for a long time. She's of course seen all sorts of different kids and parents and their home environments. These are just some of the stories my mom has experienced. There are kids from about 3 to 7-year-old range in the kindergarten. The way they behave and play is heavily age dependent, and 3-4-year-olds would usually play imitating the adults and what they have been observing around them, like stuffing a cushion in their belly to play their pregnant mom or limp around pretending to have been injured. Because they can't yet judge what is exactly right or wrong, they simply imitate the world around them. There are hardly ever any set rule in their play either, and if one of them says, "Let's play this," and the others would just follow spontaneously, creating a new game and rules as it goes along. And one day, Mom noticed these little kids playing an odd game. While a kid, let's call him Chosu, lied down on the floor, other kids were building a wall around him using sponge building blocks. Chosu was covered with a blanket to his head, and whenever he moved or twitched, other kids shouted at him, "Don't move!" Once finishing the wall, kids now decorate the wall with silk flowers or toy food. Mom asked them what kind of game they were playing. "We are making a tomb," they said. Mom firmly believes one shouldn't judge kids' behavior from an adult's point of view. And still, this was a bit creepy. And she was also worried if this wasn't a sign that Chosu was bullied by the others. So she, for once, told them that they shouldn't bully a friend. Kids then protested that it was all Chosu's idea to start with. And before Mom could respond, Chosu himself joined that it was indeed true. Mom could not say anything more and let the kids carry on with the game. And the following weekend, Chosu was killed at a car accident. It was sad and shocking news for everybody, but after the initial shock, Mom remembered that tomb-making game a few days prior. It must have been just a coincidence, but when the kids returned to kindergarten on Monday, she couldn't resist asking them cautiously, "Aren't you making a tomb again?" Then the kids replied as if it was the most logical thing. "No, we can't because Chosu isn't there." "But other kids can play his role," Mom said. "No, Chosu should be there. We can't play it without Chosu," kids insisted. They could have simply meant that they couldn't play without Chosu because the game was his invention, but Mom couldn't help but feel a bit of a chill. Another story from these 3-4-year-olds. Drawings and paintings from this age group are often abstract. They'll draw a big blob with a couple of small circles attached to it and call it a car, for example. One day a kid, let's call her Myung, drew what looked like a field of flowers, and a blue head in the middle of it. The head had eyes, nose, mouth, and hair, but no body. So Mom asked as usual, "Wow, beautiful flowers, but what is this there?" "Man," Myung said. "A man? Someone you know?" Mom said. "No." "Where did you meet him then?" "There." Myung pointed the playground outside. Now, kids of this age do not always distinguish real from their fantasy clearly. They often believe what they imagined is true. So Mom just left it at that. But in the next following days, other kids also started drawing a bodiless head in blue color, and when Mom asked what they were drawing, they all said, "Man." The drawings and what they said about this man varied, but there definitely were things in common. That he was a man despite the long hair, his face was blue, his expression was frowned, he had no body, and just his head floated around. Mom was initially worried if there wasn't some pervert spying on kids around. She alerted her staffs and carefully checked the records from surveillance cameras, but she could not find any sign of such. Worried, Mom even asked me if there was some sort of fictional character with a blue face from kids' animation or film, but I couldn't think of any. Funny thing is, kids older than 6 never mentioned or knew about a man with a blue face. Of course, it could simply that other kids having picked up the motif started from Myung, but you never get a clear answer from 3-4-year-olds. This blue man phase eventually passed, but still remains a mystery. I have 2 children, and this story is about my daughter. I don't know if it's anyway relevant, but one of my aunts is a professional shaman, and my father-in-law has also a bit of spiritual sensitivity, which he has inherited from his mother. Or perhaps, as some claims, it's just because my daughter was yet so young that her third eye was still opened. When my daughter was 2, we lived in a small flat. The owners of the building, an old couple, lived in the flat just above us. My first impression of the old landlord wasn't very positive. On the day we moved in, he threw a towel to us and said we should wipe up the mess we created in the staircase. Then one day, the landlady mentioned that her husband was hospitalized. But nothing serious, she said, and he was expected to come back home soon. Since landlady herself seemed to be not particularly worried, so I didn't give much thought about it either. Then one evening I was putting my kids to bed. My daughter said out of blue, "Mom, above the wardrobe is Blue Grandpa." To be perfectly honest, she creeped me out, even though she was my own daughter. I went to my husband, who was in the living room, and told him what our little girl said. He asked her once again, "Hey, princess, what's above the wardrobe you said?" "Blue Grandpa." It was before she learned to speak properly, and usually her answers would change every time we asked her a question. But this time of all times, she was consistent. I could not help but glimpse above the wardrobe all night long. A month passed, and then another, but there was no sign of the old landlord. His wife said his condition worsened, and one day I saw her dressed in morning dress, supported by her grown-up children in black. I just assumed the landlord must have passed away. A few days later, it was a sunny weekend. I was playing with the kids. Then my daughter suddenly stared at one corner of the ceiling in the middle of her play and said, "There's Grandpa." It felt even creepier because her face and tone was totally serious. I once again went to my husband to pass on what our girl mentioned, but this time he just brushed it off, jokingly saying, "Why, is that Blue Grandpa again?" A few days later, I ran into the landlady. She seemed still a bit dazed with the loss, that she didn't know what to do because her husband used to take care of everything about managing the building. I felt sorry for her and held her hand. And she mentioned how her late husband wanted to come back home, that he rather wanted to die in his own place, in the building he had worked and saved for all his life. I suddenly realized what this building meant for him. And perhaps, just perhaps, the grandpa my daughter mentioned might have been the spirit of the landlord looking around his beloved property one last time. Fortunately, my daughter didn't mention about the Blue Grandpa ever again. I have a 1.5-year-old daughter. People often say kids so young still maintain their pure soul and remember what it was like in their mother's womb. So I asked my little girl several times already, "Do you remember when you were in mom's tummy?" And my girl would say, "Yes." "What was it like?" I'd ask, and her reply was always, "Dark." For a change, today I asked, "Do you remember when you were born?" "I do." "What was it like?" "Ah," she said, covering her eyes with her hands as if protecting herself from bright light. "And then what did you do?" I carried on. Said she, feigning to cry. "And then?" "Water, splash, splash." You might know if you experienced a childbirth that after a birth and cut up the cord, they usually give a newborn a brief bath. Anyway, both I and my wife were amused with our daughter's answers, which encouraged me to carry on. "And why did you cry so much when you were a baby?" "Girl, girl," she said. My girl cried really a lot until she turned 100-day-old. I mean, it's nothing unusual for a baby to cry a lot, but she often bursted into crying with a sudden startle. Now, I must mention that I have a bit of spiritual sensitivity. I'm no shaman or such, but I sometimes just feel the presence. And in our first family home, I sensed one such. A little girl of 5 or 6 years of age, dressed in white pajama dress. I kept it to myself and told my wife only after we moved to the current place. And now, hearing our daughter mentioning a girl for the reason she used to cry a lot, I and my wife exchanged glances. "What did the girl do to you?" my wife asked this time. Our girl took out her little underwear and wiped wife's face with it. We could not make out what she meant, so I asked again, "What did she look like?" Our girl then flipped her head backwards and glared at her mom. Goosebumps started popping up. Guess that girl ghost was standing on her head. "So, what did she do to you?" "Panties, panties," she said, whatever she meant by that. "And what did she look like?" She bobbed her arms upwards, palms facing the ceiling, and said, "Float, float." You should know if you raised a child too. Little kids of my daughter's age have certain range of pattern in their expression and behavior. The joy of parenting is observing them expanding this range day by day. But I have never seen my daughter making that bobbing gesture or saying "float, float" before today. "Do you remember what she wore?" I asked, because I myself saw what the ghost girl wore. And my daughter suddenly frowned and whispered in a low voice as if not let others hear, "Stop it." And indeed she refused to answer any more with pouted lips, though I further asked if the girl had bothered her. To be honest, I wasn't sure if the presence of the ghost girl I sensed was true or not, and it gave me goosebumps to have it confirmed through the mouth of my little girl. But clearly wasn't a good memory for her, so I stopped asking her further as not to remind her of the bad memory. A friend of mine is an art therapist specialized for young kids. One of her clients is an autistic boy. Let's call him Kyung-soo for the sake of the story. He was slow to learn to speak and would hardly ever reply anything if others asked him something, and just stayed fixated whatever he was doing. One day Kyung-soo drew something white and yellow, lifting its arms. My friend thought he was drawing a person, and as usual asked, "Wow, Kyung-soo, what is this?" And for the first time, Kyung-soo gave a clear, straight answer. It is you! Oh, but I don't see your feet here," my friend said. "There's no feet," Kyung-soo said. "Why is that?" "'Cause it's an angel." Outlandish answer, but my friend knew very well a young kid often identify him or herself with a powerful fictional characters, like a dinosaur or Superman. In Kyung-soo's case, my friend assumed his parents should be Christians, and he was exposed to the images of angel that way. She was in any case delighted that Kyung-soo responded so clearly now. "So, Kyung-soo is an angel," she said. "Not now," Kyung-soo said. "Why not?" "'Cause I'm here now," said Kyung-soo, tapping on the floor. "So you're not an angel when you are here with me?" Kyung-soo just nodded his head. At this point, my friend felt a strange chill and asked seriously, "And what brought you here then?" Tears started dropping down from Kyung-soo's eyes. "Did anybody tell you to come here?" my friend asked again. Now Kyung-soo flooded with cry and tears, drop on the floor and kicking and punching in the air level of crying. My friend was baffled. She simply had expected him to say his mom told him to come here. She barely managed to calm him down and didn't talk about Angel to him again. Later, when she met Kyung-soo's parents, she nonchalantly asked if the family had any religion. And apparently they were atheists, even his grandparents. It meant there was no obvious route Kyung-soo might have picked up the idea and image of an angel around him. Kyung-soo was under my friend's care for a few years more until he reached the school age. By then he improved a lot and interacted with others around much more actively. At the last lesson with him, my friend asked if he remembered anything about Angel. "An angel? What about it?" was Kyung-soo's reaction, clearly having forgot everything about it. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. I don't have children of my own, and been living away from my nephews and niece too, that I actually had not much occasion to observe children in their infancy. If you have yourself, have you ever been baffled by what they said or behaved? What do you think? Could they really mean something or just innocent gibberish? Let me know in the comment. If you enjoyed my work, please give it a like and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel. Your little kindness means a lot to a small-time content creator like me. Thank you. I'll come back with something different next week. Until then, stay safe and take care.